Now that the whole world knows, the whole world is not. Oh, really? Well,
Numbers.
lowercase t.
Work in progress.
So what we have up is the spreadsheet that Andrea sent us late this afternoon. Showing the fiscal year end, preliminary fiscal year end 2023 versus the fiscal year end 2022. And we have expenditures, revenues, and free cash. So it looks like for on the expenditure side,
Expenditures were first.
what? Oh, you're not there. What are you in?
That's okay. So, yeah, expenditures, bottom line, if I just jump to that, it's about 500, just under 500,000 underspent.
Okay, so that goes to free cash.
Not all of it, because I do have encumbrances that'll be carrying forward, but it's not too much.
Okay. But you gave us an estimate of free cash later, right?
Correct, yes.
So, total expenditures, as I say, underspent by about 500. And if you want to go to the revenues.
Yeah.
Revenues were significantly up on the estimated receipts. Lower on expected taxation. Not much. And personal property taxes. Real estate taxes. Around 45,000 less, but then you'll see the estimated receipts, the local receipts, I should say. 500,000 more than what we have seen in our highest year. So we estimated 2.5, we came in at 3.5, we thought we'd come in at 3. Wow. There's some unusual items in there. One is a FEMA reimbursement that came in this current year, previous incidents.
Was that from the seawall?
Is that?
Was that from the seawall?
Yes, yeah.
Just want to remind people to speak up because Gail's taking minutes off the audio.
Excise tax. Significantly higher. As did the industrial, probably your biggest change.
Which is, well, June was up, yeah. But I'm
So-
surprised it was so high.
So that brings us the estimated free cash. So we thought it would drop in further than this, obviously with those higher revenues than expected, it won't drop this much. Which Andrew's estimating it at 3.4 million.
So that is just free cash. That does not include stabilization. So if I add the 1.9 from stabilization, it's 5.3. Okay.
Yep.
That's what surprised me. Okay.
And so if it came in and as estimated, we do 2 million plus the 1 million.
Yeah, 2.4 plus the 1.9, yeah. So we'd be at
Right.
4.3.
Well, there was the million extra receipts plus 500,000 lower expenditures, so total it's 1.5.
Yeah, roughly, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I don't know if you have other comments, Andrea, to make on the revenues or I mean, expenditures are just sort of all over the place. I mean, in terms of, it's a lot of numbers that add up.
Yeah,
Right.
A little bit here, a little bit there, but eventually.
what was the investment difference, investment income?
But we estimated real low.
Yeah.
We only estimated 17,000, we took in 234.
Just because of recession or something.
It rebounded a lot better than.
It's been very inconsistent, I think. Right? We had one
Yes.
year, yeah, one year we projected like 40 and it came in at 12, you know.
Yeah.
It's been very inconsistent. This was the first half of this year was good. Second half of last year was. An ambulance was a little higher. Recreation was a lot higher. That was double. And now what causes that?
So each.
Well, partly the beach, yes.
Certainly wasn't June.
No, not this, it was last. It was last July and August,
Right.
which
Yeah.
were hot and dry.
Okay, yeah, right.
So that's explaining that.
What about the,
License and permits were up. Well, the permitting was,
big project? Some projects.
and she also has she has FY 22 also, if you scroll further over.
What is the miscellaneous rec, non-rec pilot?
So that's where you see that FEMA. Amount.
Okay,
That
okay,
was 100,000.
okay.
That was 100 of that 134. Actually,
Yeah, and then the 50 of it is from the school for the school resource officer as well.
So did we not, did we not estimate for that or did it come in early?
We did estimate it. It's part of the 58,000. That's
Okay.
budgeting.
Okay, okay. But it comes in a year in arrears, right?
Correct.
Any other questions on revenue?
Here.
I think before we get to the projections for next year, wondering if it's possible to get a better feel from the people doing the investments on what to project. I mean, they're pros, right?
yes, but I mean, the preliminary budget gets set in December, so
Yeah.
that's a year and a half, or
Okay,
that's
okay,
6 months ahead. That's,
okay, so that's unrealistic.
it's tough to get a firm number there. We can certainly.
Now you have an enterprise fund fiscal year analysis.
Yes,
So,
so she did enterprise fund expenditures and revenues.
we have a balance. Is the balance on here? I didn't quite see it. Andrea,
A balance, like total balance, it was on the analysis page.
the enterprise fund,
Yes.
So that's what the analysis shows, so
okay,
Yeah, I can add in the retained earnings from last year and then you would increase or decrease based on what's on those lines, the applicable lines on this page.
So it increased about 580,000. Between the two.
Right, yes.
Yes,
Percent rate hike.
Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering, when we did numbers earlier this year, we kind of included the enterprise funds. And we were expecting 615,000. Last year was 890,000, but you spent some, right?
yes. I'm not remembering that number offhand. But we did use some in capital.
So is it safe to say it's about $1 million? Retained earnings and the enterprise funds.
Yes.
So water and sewer.
Yeah. water
Yeah,
and sewer,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Any more questions on this? Okay. You okay, Tom? Did you have any questions, Kathy? Okay. The next item on the agenda is to discuss the reserves. So we received some information from the town auditors.
And through Greg.
That was
Today's-
last, I sent it again.
You did.
No, I sent something today, this morning.
Yes, and okay, thank you.
Yeah. I sent it, it was probably about noon, my morning starts at noon. And then we had from before the free cash and the stabilization from the other communities.
Right.
And it looks to me like what we received, what I sent out this morning is really only talking about calculating free cash. It looks to me like it's not looking at stabilization. So if we have stabilization, then theoretically we'd go for a lower free cash balance. But that the auditor did suggest that we should include the school expenses.
Is there a calculation?
Yes, because we have a legal responsibility to meet their needs, basically. I mean,
Even if they're carrying their own.
Right. They said,
It's striking to me that that was necessary.
they just, yeah, I think it was, what did they say? I mean, they're saying it's not one size fits all. And they said, yeah, include your payments to the school. It doesn't matter that they have their own reserves. The town has a responsibility to pay them every year. And that can be a cost that goes up more than any other one.
So is that implying that we might use some of our reserves?
No, I don't think so. But I think that because of a large stabilization, I think we certainly could decrease the overall target from the 10% number. And include the schools. I mean, one of the things that bothers me a little is that we've been using reserves for routine capital items, which I don't think we should be doing. Routine capital items, like the stuff we have every year. vehicles. You know, like, yeah, but to use excess reserves for for one-time occurrences, not those recurring items in the capital. You know, like for instance, Pleasant Street water was unusually high because that was a specific project. But every year we put into the fire apparatus fund, and it just seems to me that we've been using reserves to pay for some of those ongoing things, and I think that it's just in some jeopardy. I'd rather have it to, like if we want to spend 3 or 4 million on the sewer treatment, use reserves for that.
Yeah.
Or if we want to put more into OPEB. I did ask Andrea did ask Dan Sherman to give us a number when he does the audit as to what we would need to pay to fully fund.
So
Sure, it's gonna be way too high.
I follow you, but just because. Capital's capital.
I think the challenge is if you use capital for operating fund, reserves for operating funds, and you don't have any excess reserves, now you're gonna jack up your tax rate just to cover your basic operating expenses, where if you're using it for the less frequent capital items that are a one-time occurrence, you don't have to jack up your rate to cover ongoing normal spending.
So putting in that other bucket then, like, whatever, every 7 or 10 years, we have to buy a new backhoe or something like that. Okay. So that's not the one time.
Right.
I think there are two questions here. One is, what's the size of the reserves, whatever constitutes reserves that we want to have as a target? And then the question of use.
Right, you're right, that's two different things.
So with respect to the target, first of all, defining what constitutes a reserve, I'm a little confused about the various points of view of this. There's free cash, there's stabilization, there's special reserves we set aside, like the fire apparatus, and then there's the school reserve, which it independently operates with. Are there other reserves too? Beside
The enterprise funds,
the enterprise funds?
we have about $1 million there.
Got it. So is it fair to
Which are
say they
used-
all constitute reserves? So when we
Well,
talk about the
no.
percent,
Not by definition, but
well, in terms of,
their
what-
savings.
yeah, their savings. Are they all of the same character though? Because we don't control some of them.
Yeah. Andrea, in the enterprise fund.
Yeah.
Are you using those for operating expenses or for capital expenses?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your question.
Enterprise fund excess, I can't remember what it's called.
The retained earnings?
That one.
Yes. We
Oh,
use
yeah.
that, we've used that for capital,
Okay,
not operating.
It's a fair point. The point about the fire engine fund. Did we count that within our reserve?
no,
I did think so.
Right?
No.
Yeah,
Correct.
Okay.
the only thing we're counting, historically, what we've counted in reserves is free cash and the stabilization fund.
Right.
And then when I did the annual report this year, I brought in the other items that we had, that weren't reserves, but other monies we had
set aside.
set aside that could
Okay.
be spent,
Like the fire engine fund.
like the fire engine fund, which we're depleting this year. And the retained earnings in the enterprise funds. So that you add those all up. I mean, if free cash is 3.4, stabilization is 1.9, that's 5.3, and then if you have about $1 million of retained earnings in the enterprise funds, that's about 6.3. And when I added up on our spreadsheet, the total operating expenses, including the school, were 32.7 million. So 10% would be 3.27 million, and 5% would be 1.6 million.
And if you follow the logic in that letter, it was two months worth of operating expenses, roughly 16%. struck me as excessive.
Yeah.
They contradicted themselves.
Yes, I agree with you, yeah.
I don't see the point of having 2 months worth of expenses.
No, I don't
Doesn't
either.
seem-
No.
It's not like we can dip into free cash and use it. If we run short of money, the town has to appropriate. it.
Yes.
They can either appropriate free cash or increase the tax rate.
But it could be past the ability to increase the tax. If it's,
Right,
Maybe because you need an override, you already
no,
know.
because if we've already set the tax rate, we've already set. the
Oh,
tax
I
rate.
see,
So
already
if it's-
set it.
if that emergency comes in March,
Yes,
the only option is to run to town.
but we can, if an emergent, so if we have an expenditure increase in November, we can get it into the tax rate, correct?
You can't.
At the town meeting in November, so that can be covered in, if we did that this coming November, it would be in the fiscal year 24 tax rate.
right.
Okay. If you have an emergency between that November town meeting and the April town meeting, you can appropriate it at the April town meeting, right? So how much of an emergency would you have that you need to spend it? You need to access money immediately. We don't seem to move that fast.
And the other,
I'm not losing sleep over the issue. In terms of having the ability to pay an emergency expense. I'm much more worried about what our long-term funding plan is.
Right.
That's personally where I think the majority of my time and energy needs to go. Right.
we have to make some choices.
But so. Seems to me that we've got 1.9 million in stabilization, which we could spend part of it on something like OPEB if we want to reduce the amount of stabilization. If we were like aiming for a 5% target, that's below the amount of stabilization, so we wouldn't want to do that. Right? So could we start out this next year with the stabilization plus $1 million in free cash?
Plus,
Yeah, so it would be, it's not, it's 2.9 divided by 32.7 is 8.9%. It's not much. Or do we assume we're gonna use some stabilization? I mean, do we bring it down to like 7, recommend going down to 7 for some?
again, just to be clear, 7 of reserve fund plus stabilization
Total.
total.
We're now at 10%, so our current target is 10% for both free cash and stabilization.
In fact, we're even higher, I think, than that.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, we're 5.3.
that's just our target.
32 million.
And we've been higher for years.
Yeah.
So we keep spending it. But 7%,
So again, I think instead of
would be 2.3.
thinking, you want to be at X next year, I think it makes more sense to say, how much do we need to spend on capital over the next few years? And are we able to draw from that reserve in order to enable us to do that capital?
But see, you're always coming at it from the opposite direction
Right.
that I do.
I know I do.
And I think that we need to have a target for the reserves, so we know how much is available based on that target we want to set. Then
No, I agree with having a
we,
target. but I
we
don't think
know, we know what we have in excess levy capacity. And I agree, yes, we have to figure out what we need to spend on capital and not be just doing the same thing we've been doing in the past. We need to look at specific projects, but we can't do that till we get the facility study.
But I guess my point that I'm trying to make is that it may not were to hit the target precisely next year,
Oh, right,
if it makes more sense to gradually draw down because of the timing of certain capital.
I don't think there's any resistance to that concept.
right. I think we're just trying to come up with a new target.
That's right, exactly.
And we haven't gotten to the point of saying, when are we gonna spend down to that target?
Exactly. Over what period of time?
So Greg, as much as you have a sense, I don't talk endlessly for, revenues being above estimated and expenditures below, and that sort of being this kind of money that gives us a little bit of latitude in capital. But then, there's been a strong argument made for, hey, let's try to, be more on target for that, which then will leave us with less cap, so less spare capital potentially. Money for capital.
Yeah,
Do you have a sense of, given the exercise that we went through for this coming fiscal year, that we're gonna be end up, with not as much overage? Or do you think we'll still?
I mean, I don't think so, but I have been wrong in those predictions in the past. The yeah, it's all the variables. So
Right, and we were just looking at them.
how big a snow season do we have?
Yeah.
That's a big factor. How many people end up taking family planning health insurance? That's a big factor. And we've gotten lucky on those. And that's often what drives that underspend.
Greg, are those, some of those choices made at a particular cycle of the year, like fall for the health plan choices?
No, because you could have someone, have a,
A life event off cycle would drive that.
or a new employee.
or, yeah,
I mean, this year, 1.4 million. I mean, that's almost 3 times what it's run the last few years.
yeah, that's, I was surprised to see that.
We thought we were being so tight.
I know, well, yeah, next year we'll think that, but, yeah, but, okay. Yeah, I'm comfortable with the idea that we, would have this kind of, 2 to 3 year spend down of that
Down to what?
excess revenue gets exactly down. 10% has always been the number that we've kind of kept around. And so, and then we hear feedback from the auditor that says, okay, I don't recommend that you're making that 10% just of the town budget. We recommend that it includes the district
Which is
as
what
well.
we've done in the past.
And we've always done that.
Yeah.
And so that idea gets scrapped.
And other towns vary from 5% up to 10%.
Okay. And so,
And some of them don't get stabilization.
right. And if it were 10%, that would mean that would be at 3.2 range. So we'd be 1.9 stabilization and 1.3 was. But so that's gonna be a couple million. I guess I don't have a strong conviction about, that 10 is wrong and 8 is right. I just don't have a sense for it, to be honest with you. I do it does feel a little bit off that maybe 2/3 of it would be in stabilization versus 1/3 reserve. I think stabilization maybe at $1 million might be reasonable.
Simply because,
In my time here, I don't think we've ever accessed stabilization. So that's 12 years.
We, back in 2011, I think when Andy and I both came on, our reserves were like 5.3% of the total operating budget. And we had almost nothing in our stabilization was very low. So we just started putting 150,000 a year into stabilization. And then I think it was last year, we kind of said, whoa, and the year before, whoa, I don't think we need to put any more in stabilization. So there wasn't a policy of we want stabilization to be X%. We were being conservative because of those lean years. And those lean years evaporated and then we were up over 16%.
maybe heresy to say this, but I think it's something that comes down to an arbitrary decision. I think the 7 to 8% is a good target. I remain unconvinced about how to divide it. I know you're commenting on that.
No.
To me, it's all one. I know it takes different votes on town meeting floor. I have the impression that the history here is stabilization was created by the state to encourage savings by municipalities.
Yeah.
And it's been overtaken by free cash for various reasons, and I just consider them one.
Mhm.
Well, I think that, for instance, in this budget year, if we come up with a project that we want to fund, and it makes sense to use some of the stabilization
Sure.
to fund that for a specific project, then that would be a way
Mhm.
to decrease the size of the stabilization. If there was one specific, I mean, I think you want it to be only one specific
Oh, I see.
project because it's a 2/3 vote.
I see. Because you want it to be clear to people
Yeah.
around a specific item. That's fine, but I think 7 to 8% is a reasonable target for quote reserves, and that would include free cash and stabilization. Why do I think that? This is the closest I can come to it. But I just think we have more reserves now than are necessary. How you choose to spend them, and target a project or something, I'll wait to see what might be suggested. I understand your logic.
But from what we're reading, it's more than most. Right, so.
And the fact that seem to be adding so much each year makes a
Yes,
difference
yes.
too.
Absolutely.
The only question is accessibility. Just be careful when you say less than unloaded funds. Because if we combine stabilization with free cash, what plenty of towns are down in the high teens and 20s.
And they may
I
have
also
good
heard that
reasons
some
for
towns
doing that,
don't
and
have
so to your point. Going back to what you said earlier, Sarah, it's about that window of time, it's about managing risk, right? And so what is our risk level? At this point, we're sitting on some money, and so our risk level is a little bit lower, and I think the 7 or 8% target personally. That's just my personal opinion, not one of the boards. We have not discussed anything at the board level.
To other people.
I look at,
7 or 8%.
yeah, I look at two factors. One is, we still are conservative with our receipts. If we get closer with receipts, we can revisit this, but like, we can keep it at 8 if our receipts are always coming in over. If we get closer with our receipts, maybe we look at going to a 9 or 10. But that's one thing that's always a conservative thing. The other thing, my feeling is that the reserve capacity, the reserve levy capacity is, to me, a sense of reserve, where we don't have to get into an override, we can just go to a 3%. And until we start getting that back down, I think, if that goes down to 0 and our receipts are coming in pretty close within a acceptable range, we could talk about going to 10%. But
What is the reserve levy capacity at this point?
Andrea, what is our estimated increase for 2024 now? It keeps changing,
We're right around 2%.
2%, so that's another 5%. So according to my calculations, we had 2.5%, then we had 1%, then we had 0.5%, and now we have another 0.5%, so that would total 4% of excess levy
I
capacity,
understand that you given the derivation.
because we haven't spent any.
Dean, I share your view. And
Well,
I-
team puts some logic to your number.
fine.
It wasn't just.
So that what you're saying is the cumulative effect of the excess levy capacity is why one reason why lowering the reserves makes sense.
At this point in time,
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the elevator speech
Yeah.
for the residents.
And plus, we have the million in retained earnings in the enterprise fund that we're not including in this number, which is used for water and sewer capital projects.
and the school, I'm okay with them having an additional reserve for themselves because of the volatile situation between Manchester and Essex. All that, I think that's a kind of a stabilization fund in itself. So I can support that, yeah. I do think it's a double reserve, but it seems to be
Okay,
warranted.
so you would calculate our reserves,
Yes.
including the, including
Yeah, at least until we can, if that gets resolved. You know, we've dipped into that more than we wanted to, and might have to in the future.
So Sarah, if we apply all of just what's been said. What's the reserve that comes out of all that? It's 8%. Of essentially the town operating.
Well,
Am I hearing
there's-
this correctly?
Yes.
There's 5.3 in reserves.
Right.
Plus $1 million in retained earnings in the enterprise funds, which is 6.3% of
Right.
cash we're sitting on. We've appropriated the public safety vehicle fund. We did that in June. So that 1.5 million was used. Okay. So it's 6.3 million of reserves plus retained earnings.
Yes.
And then we've got 4% of excess levy capacity
Yes.
where you can increase, which would, if we increase taxes 6.5% in this upcoming fiscal, that would put us in the position we would have been in if we had increased taxes 2.5% from 2019 to today, but people would not have had to pay those amounts for the intervening years. So it still costs them less, it just is a big increase.
So when we get all that done, does that release or potentially release about $3 million to be no longer considered potentially for capital projects? Whether it's from free cash or stabilization?
Well, I
I'm trying to
think-
do the-
I
I'm
think-
trying to do the delta change when you apply this.
Well, if you did, just calculate this,
They go to 8%.
8. 7. Is 2.6 million.
Yep.
And we have 5.3 million in reserves plus $1 million in retained earnings, so we have 6.3.
So I'm using the 5.2, so it releases about 3 or something a little less than that.
Yeah. 2.5, 3 million.
Sounds like a good thing to me.
And so I'm not sure if I was, the excess levy capacity, I wouldn't necessarily use that as a rationale for driving down the reserve.
Well, it gives us
Gives us flexibility.
Yes.
additional flexibility. I think,
Because the excess levy capacity is, could be used for a combination of operating.
Oh, yeah.
capital,
sure,
Right.
yeah, it's just money
Yeah, no, I get it.
that the town can spend without an override. That's really all it is.
Right.
Just like free cash can be spent
Right.
without an override, and stabilization can, but stabilization still requires 2/3 vote. It doesn't need an override, right? It just
No,
needs
it's just-
the 2/3 vote at town meeting.
Whereas the regular reserve fund is just a majority vote.
Yes.
Yes.
And
So,
increasing the levy limit is a majority vote,
right,
because that just rolls up in the budget.
right. So I was thinking a little bit about the type of project that might come upon, town meeting can always be a little bit. The tide can go one way or the other, pretty easily sometimes during discussion. So I'm trying to think of the kind of compelling project that would, that would usually get 2/3 support versus just majority. And does that, is there a rationale for that, the split between stabilization?
Well, and I think that's what we have to talk about when we get into the capital part. Because for instance, if we need 3 to 4 million to, for the hardening of the water sewer treatment, what's it? Improve the water sewer treatment plant, that might be something that people might give a 2/3 vote on. I mean, that's a specific project that needs to be done.
Right.
And we've been kicking it down the road. But there may be other things that are more important, I don't know, but that's just one that
Yeah.
Chuck has talked about, and to me, I say, geez, we should fund that.
It sounds like
Yeah.
we're losing money by not.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas some other projects, I wouldn't wanna spend stabilization for the recurring, I wouldn't wanna spend stabilization on water and sewer pipes. It's not a defined enough project,
Right.
it's an ongoing expense.
Remember, stabilization is just 1.9, so if you take it down to $1 million.
Yeah.
It's really a $900,000 project.
And it doesn't do very much to vote on it.
Right, yeah, you know, so.
Okay.
So. Do I have our motion to move our target to?
From
to
10 to
net
8?
worth? Yeah, from 10 to 8,
You have that
recommendation,
I move that.
I'll second.
any seconds, any discussion?
And to include the school.
It's right.
Yeah, the 8% of the total operating,
That's right.
Yeah.
80% of the total.
okay,
Oh,
okay, I'll take a vote, Tom,
Yes.
Dean,
yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Sarah says yes. Okay.
Big decision. Thanks, quite a change in terms of.
Yeah.
How you look at capital items going forward.
Okay, so the next thing was the recommending a policy for when money held over from capital items is returned to free cash. And we received a spreadsheet on this.
And I'm a little confused about how to read that spreadsheet. So I'd like some help, Greg.
Is that, that's not that spreadsheet.
I sent it with the agenda. I sent
Okay,
it
so
again,
What's the agenda?
I'm pretty sure. It would have been, was that Monday or Sunday? Yeah. Yeah, but a lot of it is,
So I highlighted in yellow, on this, see the screen here. I highlighted in yellow things that were just appropriated for FY 24. Basically.
yeah,
But Greg, if you were to say something that remains after 2 years is up for review and consideration as, you know, an amount of money that's appropriated, it's not used within a period of time. How do I evaluate that? Is there time periods? I
yes.
must have missed it, but.
There's a
Yeah,
start column
there's a,
that started as a
Sorry.
fiscal year in which it's approved.
Okay, then I didn't focus on that. Okay.
So the fiscal year 24 would be ones that the money was just available July 1st of this
Exactly
year.
right. So if I looked at everything that was in 22 or earlier,
Yeah,
those are your suspect ones, if you will.
Or,
okay.
I need more information as to what's going on.
Didn't get it right.
Yeah, at least up for discussion.
Well,
Yeah.
right, and, you know, one of the thoughts I had is, could you consider that if the money hasn't been spent by the end of the fiscal year after the fiscal year, which is appropriated, i.e. 2 years, and no RFP has gone out, no contract has been signed,
Oh, I see. What you're saying.
that it would go to free cash unless it's held up because of permanent or something like that, like the money for the culvert.
There's some extenuating.
So,
That's in permitting.
Yeah.
But some of these other things like the library bathroom. The poll house for the DPW. I mean, I think the library bathroom, where was it? 2020,
Yeah, so that-
okay,
So the trustees rejected the
They did.
different options that were viable. And so the project is not going forward, and so
Did they offer their own options? Or they just rejected?
they didn't come up. with-
library, so library has from,
It's one of the, I put it in red.
They wanted a
Because
bathroom.
what I did in red was highlight things that most likely be.
so they
A
have,
couple of
the
questions.
accessibility bathroom is
There-
207,000. 207,000, and that was approved in fiscal year 2021.
21. And there's
Yeah.
200. Yeah,
Well, to me, that's a prime candidate too.
You,
Right, so you ask for an explanation and you hear the.
That's what I was gonna
and you
say.
make a decision.
From a policy standpoint, if we're saying 2 years,
it's not just an arbitrary cut them off, it's then we get an explanation.
Well, I would say that obviously we want to give advance notice. I mean, you don't want to just all of a sudden
But there may be
implement a
reasons
policy.
we're not
But-
aware.
But I think that I think there's a lot of excuses being given to Andrea that maybe aren't particularly valid. It seems to me if you're not in the position of going out for bid after 2 years, unless you're held up by permitting.
Well, certainly
Yeah.
the original funded amount is no longer valid
Right.
in this.
That it could go
inflationary-
back to free cash and then the project can come up again. It's not like you're saying you can't do it.
So is it automatic or is that a review item?
That's what I'm trying to get. I think it needs to
To
be,
be some level of discussion, you know, because I think, you know, I mean, we can argue things like, you know, the pole barn and the bathrooms, but there's certainly a lot of things, you know, certainly I've heard about a number of things in DPW territory that are not completely under their control. You know, I think there's, at least there's a rationale for some decisions that have been made in a lot of cases, probably not just in DPW. And it's good for us to understand that.
You know, like the town hall generator. That was approved in fiscal year 23, so that still has time.
So the
means every
effectively after a
2
2-year period, those items would be isolated for discussion at a meeting.
yeah, I think,
Trigger a review,
yeah,
of trigger a fin.
I mean, for
review.
instance, you have on here,
That's good practice.
you have the rotunda. Where's that? I've lost that.
so that was 60,000.
And that was quite a while ago. When was it? Greg?
A year ago.
Oh, yeah, so that wasn't so long ago. But I mean, obviously, we know we need to do work on the rotunda.
Yeah, so that
So you-
originally was slated for the design work, but we got a grant for that
Yeah.
instead.
I see.
So that's the question is because
So-
you don't need it for the design work to put that back and then separately make the request for the project.
Yeah.
Could the policy be, Sarah, as simple as after 2 years, those items will be up for review as to whether they want to remain as they are or be put in free cash?
I mean, we have Sweeney parking lot
So.
that's
so-
from 2015. We're still carrying it at 32,000.
So it is a good practice, you know, money that hasn't started to be spent or whatever triggers a FinCom review after a duration that you identify. What about if a project is completed, right? Does money hang around?
Andrea,
Different criteria.
It's under closed, though.
I
It's probably
think she
closed at that.
closes though.
Okay,
Like she has 2 things listed on here.
like if the project closeout's pretty clean, is what I'm.
Andrea, are they?
Yes. Yeah, I review it with department heads at year end to see which ones are closed and what are open. So anything that I close, if there's balances left, those don't get carried forward and they fall to free cash.
So for instance, the DPW compressor, she has a note saying it's no longer needed. So that theoretically would go to free cash.
Correct.
Automatic.
Yeah, and that's from
Without review.
fiscal year 2020.
That doesn't.
Yeah.
Right.
And
I
then
just wanna make
she,
sure that
yeah.
sometimes project closeouts or project, you know, things aren't always tidy and sounds like Andrea's doing a great job.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the fire department reporting software, she says no longer need due to joining regional.
Yeah, actually, that's changed again.
I was
Oh.
misinformed on that one.
So
But is it more than 2 years old?
no, it's,
Okay, so the answer is still.
And then you
it's still a
have,
window.
Yeah, it's fiscal year, and then you have like the police tasers. And she's indicated that's a 5-year payment plan. But
So that's not a
that amount
program.
is allocated each year and they spend it each year. So it's not like they're building it up.
How many tasers? Secure.
Rabbit hole.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
That was a long discussion at town meeting on that, I recall.
One per person.
I think it's one per officer.
Everyone has their own card.
You know, you've got the match on the compost from 2019.
so yeah, I wanted to ask.
No,
Chuck
that was
about
spent, that was spent.
Well, there's still more compost monies. There's just over 100,000.
You've got money from 2019 on complete streets. It hasn't been spent. Well, we've got money under complete streets and then we have money under the town match.
Given the amount of spending we're gonna have on capital projects, maybe time to get the tin cup out and look under the sofa, you know, I'm just saying, this is a really good discussion, guys. I hope.
Yeah. And I think that what would be helpful is for all of these items.
So Chuck can chime in a bit here.
Oh.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if you wanted me to answer any of these questions, I'm happy to do it. I wasn't sure if just naming these projects off was, you know, an opportunity for me to chime in, or if you were just going over the.
I think we're just kind of going over at a higher level, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that what would be helpful is for these capital items that we're allocating money every year, is if there's some type of like a 5-year history of what's allocated and what's spent each year. So we get a better feel for whether it's accumulating or not. Because you can't tell from this, really, and we have.
Why do you need that, Sarah?
Well, because we're putting money away in the budget and we don't really get, we need exactly this amount for this. And so, you know, we need to understand that if we've been putting 50,000 a year away for something for 5 years and we're only spending 20, maybe we don't need to continue putting 50,000 away.
Can we do
Well, I
that
guess-
with things like the fire fund? The equipment fund, but what else?
Oh, there's,
So we just need to
Shop
be clear on
equipment.
how we want to fund some projects. So for example, Chuck has been accumulating sewer dollars with the hope of having enough money eventually to do major upgrades. But if you're saying rather than forcing us to gradually build up those dollars, you'd rather see a $3 million request, and whether we bond for that or not, you know, that'll have to be decided how much funds we, funding we have. So we need to be clear because in the past that we have decided that we need to save up, we need to accumulate those dollars so that we have enough to do the project.
Useful explanation.
but
Thank you.
there's several items. I mean, obviously, the Central Street culvert, we've had multiple allocations. I think that is not a question. Storm damage repairs, there's being money put aside every year. You know, it's just getting a set, harbor dredging account.
Useful to see the groupings by fiscal year that they
Yes.
allocated.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. We get the department, yes,
Yeah.
yes,
And
yeah.
then
What's
all-
19, what's 20, what's 21?
And then also to see,
Yes.
you know, for that given year, what was the total count allocation?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, just to get a sense.
Yeah.
It'd be much easier, I think, to look at and to evaluate.
Sweet.
You can sort by year.
Yeah, yeah.
I assume that's just a sort function.
Well, some of these have multiple appropriations.
Okay.
In one
I
line,
see,
that's
I
the
see.
issue.
And so therefore you're gonna have multiple years, aren't you?
Like the police speed trailer, it's all spent, but there were multiple allocations, multiple appropriations.
So Chuck has his hand.
Oh, go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, you know, we have to keep in mind too that, you know, these things are approved at town meeting, but they're based on budgets that are, you know, made throughout the prior fiscal year. And then by the time we get there, we're bidding. So like we're kind of losing, you know, from my perspective at least, we're kind of losing on both sides where it's like, you know, we want the exact number because that's what we want to take to town meeting, but then, you know, you didn't spend the entirety of the appropriation. So now we need to, you know, cut back what we had instead of, I think you guys are right on some of these things. And then on others, I'm like, you know, it's going to make it really hard to kind of tailor the job. You know, for instance, every single one of my water main jobs, I bid additional work in the hopes that we'll get good numbers so that we can do more work with the appropriation we're given. But then if that's not the case, or, you know, there's inevitably something where the appropriation ends and we have to hold that money, Or, I'm trying to spend to a limit constantly throughout the project duration. So it's very hard to kind of dial this in to the nickel. So I just want to make sure you understand that there's always going to be some contingency, and there's always going to be some project,
We're just looking,
niceties.
we're just looking
but-
for a 5-year history so that we can look at those things where maybe we're always over appropriating.
No, but I mean, Chuck makes a very fair point, which is, to appropriate money for a project that you may only have some high level
Right.
estimate
Yeah.
for, and then it goes to bid like a year later,
Yeah.
and inflation happens, all sorts of things happening. And so we're never gonna hit that allocation on the nose.
Right.
And so if there's some left over, great. If you run short, then that's a different conversation.
Right.
But, and I think that's okay. But you're saying something else, Sarah, which is that, let's track a 5-year running history of these.
Just some of the appropriations that we do every single year.
Yeah.
Just to kind of get a feel for, I mean, maybe one year when you double that appropriation, the year before was low, well, that's okay.
So you're
Just to get a
distinguishing between
sense.
Single project and one that has continuing appropriations.
Yeah,
Got it.
just to make sure that the appropriations being made are reasonable. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Not to the penny, just,
Yeah.
It's,
So when you have an ongoing appropriation on an annual basis to a project, when do you review it? Do you do that annually? Or do you do that only after a certain period of time? Because I understand the single project. It was appropriated a certain year, if it's still, the money's still there in 2 years, takes a review. But on the continuing ones, what would you
I
like?
think you look at the history when you're determining the appropriation for that
I
year's
see,
money.
okay, so it's less of a review issue than
Right,
just determining this year's appropriation.
right,
I see, okay.
adjusting it if necessary.
That's it, yeah. But I'm distinguishing between two different kinds of processes
Right,
to do different kinds of projects.
But the 5-year history and sort of the discussion around this list is, it's so hard to, I've never had a feel for all this, because
right,
it's just kind of out there in the ether. And so I think having a process where, by policy, we're reviewing things after they're 2 years old. And then B, just having a better understanding of the kind of the running average of
Right,
things.
yeah.
I think
that's all we're,
that's just gives us a better feel.
right,
So I also, the concept of like at the state and federal level of municipal projects we bid, we usually add a 10% contingency, a construction contingency at the beginning. And perhaps maybe we do that when we're looking at these projects, asking at the meeting is include a contingency that gets returned before the next project, so the next year when you have another project with we return what was left from the previous one. From that, just to try to, because Chuck definitely needs some wiggle room when he's doing these projects.
right, but I think, Chuck, don't you have a certain indicator of what a reasonable amount for a project will be?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I have a reasonable indicator, but that's what I'm kind of getting at, is it's sometimes more art than science. And so I think I have a feel for it. We do have unit price contracts where, I can kind of, get the quantities ahead of time, but, to only really have one bite at the apple every year at annual town meeting, I have to kind of think, 5 steps ahead in some cases. And so it's not the easiest thing in the world. And so I'm fine with a 5-year running average. I'm here right now. Like I'm fine with having these conversations throughout the year. I just don't want to get into a situation where, we're making assumptions about, canceling, appropriations and stuff like that, where, there's always a reason, whether it's, something of my doing or not, there's always a reason. So I guess that's all I'm really getting at. But yeah, I feel like we've done a pretty good job in the 5 years I've been here. I just, like Greg said a minute ago, we've been doing it one way. I'm fine with changing that, but let's just all make sure we're aware of the ramifications and what that means. Does that make sense? Or do I need to go more? I mean, to put it another way, I mean, just like on any project we do, not only do I, come to you guys ahead of time to get the money, I then go to the select board, when we're, pitching the project or changing the project and things get horse traded. Sometimes I have to go to Concom and they, add something or delete something or move something. Then I have to go to planning board and they don't like what we're doing, so we revise it again. And then I get a contractor on board who says, we don't want to do it that way, we want to do it this way.
Chuck,
So it's a big
This
thing.
is Kathy. So when, Susan and I come and talk to you again about that gated process, we may want to implement for some of these things. That might help with some of that so that you're not going to 10 different meetings to get feedback on what needs to happen. It might help you, get the feedback you need all
Yeah,
at
I mean,
once,
yeah,
so
I'm-
I think that can help you as
Yeah,
well.
I'm all for that. I think some of it is, based on the way our projects go, is somewhat inevitable. Like I kind of have to go to planning board meetings. I have to go to Concom meetings, like for their
So
bylaws.
that's
So
where our governance project can help adjust the
Yeah,
governance
streamline it.
approach to make it easier for you to get what you need.
So anyway, and then, but by the time I get to a real number and everything else, like then I have Andrea sign off that we have the money, then I have Greg sign off that we can do a contract. And then me and Nate actually get to do the work. Like it's a lot that goes into it. So I just want to make sure that, we're not doing things, knee jerk here.
No, and I think that Chuck, one of the things we're trying to get to is that hopefully some of the prep work can be done in advance before we put it on the budget so that things are a little more definitive and more likely to be done within the 2-year period after the appropriation. That's kind of what we're trying to get to some extent.
So that may mean dividing out design work versus construction to not do one.
Good.
That's one technique, yeah.
But I also, I would leave room for us to recognize a certain project that doesn't fit within the 2-year ban.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. Absolutely.
There will be plenty of
Plenty
exceptions.
of those, especially the big ones, yeah.
I mean, you look at the culvert.
Yeah.
How long we've been funding that?
right,
I mean, that, and that Center Street culvert, we started in fiscal year, no, we started in 7/1/17, fiscal year 2018.
Right.
And there's
Yeah.
perfectly good reasons why it hasn't occurred. Projects increased in scope, doesn't have permitting, I mean, and I think that sort of thing, yes, we can understand. It's more the routine stuff of people asking for an appropriation and them not doing it. It makes sense because if it's been more than 2 years, the cost is gonna be different. So it makes sense to go back for a new appropriation and
And the projects that are in the 5-year capital plan this shouldn't even be an issue, because it's in the capital plan. These are just the outliers that.
No, these are things
But
that,
sometimes things do happen.
yeah.
There are glitches and delays and.
And those are the ones we have, but like the water lines and sewer upgrades, that's all.
How do you want to express this policy?
So I want a motion.
Motion, okay.
so I would move that we have a process whereby we are reviewing any one of the line items on this capital appropriation list that haven't been spent in 2 years. Which is not to say that after 2 years, we're immediately, taking the money away, we're just talking about it. And
It will need to come for the Andrew review it, and then it'll come before the finance committee to review.
Yes,
yes,
but not town meeting,
No,
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 doesn't need time.
this isn't a town meeting vote.
because they get approved at the time.
It doesn't matter, money goes back to free cash without the need. It's only if you spend more, if it's appropriate, it goes back.
That review could set a new
And
clock.
then we have a review, we review the 5-year history of the ongoing appropriations just for reason,
Could set a
when
new-
we do the budget.
could set a new time. For further, review, depending on that conclusion, that could be another 2 years, it could be another different interval, depending on the nature of the project.
Do I have a second?
Yes.
Peter seconds it. Any more discussion? A vote, Tom,
Yes.
Dean. Andy,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Sarah votes yes. Ooh, we're actually making some decisions
We'll be very excited.
tonight.
Action packed.
The next item, I'm not sure what was supposed to be on the agenda. And it's the DPW infrastructure capital run rate.
Oh.
And I said vehicle and equipment, but I think maybe that's not right. I think it was supposed to be,
I wasn't sure what you meant by the capital.
Doug had a spreadsheet.
Was that the, like, just the, hey, we're gonna be doing water pipe replacement for the next 40 years, and so we need $3 million a year for that and $500,000 for
Yeah.
streets? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Because he did send around the vehicle and equipment spread list.
Everyone,
I thought he said,
I don't remember that.
I looked at it. I
Oh,
thought,
you did? Okay, well, then I must miss.
I didn't look, I didn't see it, but that doesn't,
did you
Sorry,
send?
I don't think I think I just, it was just Greg and Andy on that email. So I apologize. I didn't know
That was
Yeah.
my-
okay, that's-
which way to push it through.
we can review that in conjunction with the capital, when we do the capital.
okay,
Okay,
so they were this one.
Yeah.
This one's-
Yeah.
All right. You're off the hook, Chuck.
Can we get a draft of the facility study?
no, it's not ready for us.
When it's available, yes.
I should have something I can circulate in the next week or two.
Okay, good.
We met with them last week to go over our kind of initial comments.
Okay.
So I'm guessing I'll get it back. I thought maybe this week, but probably next week.
Okay, great, yeah. Maybe for our next meeting. Yeah. Okay. Any other town administrator, town accountant financial updates?
No, the end of the year reporting is the big item, I think. Lots of POs being written and processed right now is the first thing
Oh,
that
yeah,
always
right.
happens. So we're into the new fiscal year.
And I really liked the monthly report we received from the fire chief.
Oh, that was really good.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that sort of bulleted.
I'm
Yes.
wondering if we can get something from the police chief and
Yeah, they're gonna
and
work together.
DPW, just to high level, so, yeah.
No, I've got a good feeling about this.
Yes, I do too.
That's a charm.
Any updates from liaisons?
So that's a good segue.
Okay,
didn't do my report last.
okay, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I had a nice meeting, chief.
Oh, good,
He, overall, he seems like he's really got it figured out. Very aware of the overtime issue, that's part of that report that we just talked about. You know, asking from a staffing standpoint, he feels they're adequately staffed. His comment was there's always room for more, but he feels like they're adequately staffed.
Good.
Now, the one kind of side comment to that, you know, talking a little bit about the call fires. He's not that excited.
Okay.
I think he echoes a few of the people that were on this committee saying there's really not a community that supports that kind of a process. So he's not that jazzed about it. His comment to me was something like, you know, the time and money that's being spent on that would probably be better directed elsewhere, possibly a partner. Which he knows of. From a facility standpoint, needs updating. He walked around, he showed me a bunch of stuff. Yeah, we talked about, you know, the potential flooding issue and the safety issue with that. He pointed out something that never occurred to me. There's no facilities for female firefighters there. So stuff like that, it kind of all adds up. I know we've talked about that.
yeah,
And a couple of notes here, to make sure. The morale is getting better.
oh, good,
He's aware of it. He has some processes in place to continue to improve that. So he's feeling pretty good about that. From the vehicle contract, just. Oh, that's good too. That'll help.
yeah,
From an equipment standpoint, he's excited about the new ladder truck. Pointed out the need probably down the road for, we talked about the ambulance, we talked about the pumper. So these are those issues to do.
So Greg, we had something from Chief Cleary kind of laying out money that needed to be set aside for the various equipment. I'm wondering if the fire chief can look at that
Oh,
and
yes,
see whether
He
he,
has that, he's reviewing it.
okay, and get it to us by the time we do the
Yes.
capital budget.
Yes.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
Because I think, I think on some of these things, we've just been putting money aside, and it makes more sense if we have a plan and say, no, we don't need 200,000, we need 400,000. You know,
An apparatus. Fire apparatus.
Yeah.
Plans, if you
Yeah,
could have a good fire
because we have
apparatus.
for the police, we
Right.
have it for the police vehicles, it's on a 3-year cycle, maybe it can go to 4-week cycle when they're EVs.
Shouldn't they have come in today?
They came in, yeah, this
Yeah,
morning.
Todd
Oh, is
said
that
they were
some?
coming in today.
Those are the two administrative
Feel
ones.
like-
Exciting. Is the new fire chief on board with that? The last fire chief's kind of apparatus plan, i.e. the squad car being traded away and all that?
Yeah, he's, that's okay,
Yeah,
he's fine with that.
okay.
And he made kind of an offhanded comment, I don't know if it's something he wants to bring up, I'm sure he will. Go back to the ambulance. Having another staff car for a deputy chief that could kind of double as a response to partner with the Essex folks. As opposed to replacing or buying a new ambulance. Well, so yes, so
Obviously not
if they have 4 on. Which they will, 60% of the time. And there's a mutual aid call. Keep our ambulance in town.
Oh, okay,
Run-
makes sense.
Run with a staff car, yeah, staff car, run with a SUV.
To do ALS services,
To
but
do
no
ALS service
transport.
With Essex's ambulance
Okay, oh, that makes sense, okay.
or someone else's ambulance.
Yeah.
So articulated that much. I did, that's what he was trying to say. Yeah. He's got that as.
So you buy another vehicle that's not,
That's special.
It's, you buy
Yeah.
a $60,000.
right, yeah,
But it also has multiple.
Okay.
So don't don't have 2 ambulances.
Have a way to
We
respond.
still-
Or with a simpler piece of transportation
and
apparatus.
still provide the ALS services.
I didn't steal his thunder there, but that's the stuff he's talking. I'd still like to talk about the second ambulance long term. In his mind, that's the bread and butter of
Yeah.
the operations. But you know, that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
Right, James. I have a question on that. When an ambulance goes out, mutual aid call, does that trigger overtime? Is that where the 300?
No.
No.
The overtime is merely calling people in to fill shifts when people are out in training or on vacation.
He also said that he is, and that report we just talked about, trying to include overtime bills. And he's trying to break them down so that we get an idea of what's called, what's happening.
Yeah.
So he'll break it down. So that was a shift fill. Exactly. Exactly. Filling shifts and with the detail, especially that. We spent a long time actually talking about communication. In fact, we want to be very open and communicate often and a lot. So that we don't run into issues where everybody's surprised.
Right.
Overall, he's dialed in.
That's when we get in trouble, is when we're surprised.
He knows that.
Okay, any
So
other,
I met with the harbor master.
okay,
We talked about 2 studies. The 2 very distinct parts of the harbor master job, one is facilities management essentially and maintenance in the harbor, and the other is enforcement. And it'd be very useful as we think of his departure in the next 3 years, to think about how to deal with those 2 very distinct responsibilities, as well as making decisions in the near future about how succession will be worked here. And that we could expect in the next budget cycle to have those 2 topics be very central to the harbor budget. I think that summarizes it, without going into a lot of detail. I think 2 very useful conversations, and I thought it would lead to multi-year planning around the harbor, which I haven't been aware of as being quite as on top of as I think we might get in the
well,
next
how long is buying the
11 years.
Yeah, so before that, we didn't even have,
Okay, but
I mean,
I'm
the police chief,
not
the
complaining.
police chief was the harbor master, so we had no plan,
I'm not complaining.
right?
I'm
Yeah,
merely saying
yeah.
this will be an impetus, I
Right.
think, to sharpen that focus.
Yeah.
That's the report.
And I've been pleased to see in the paper that we seem to be doing enforcement on the water.
Yes.
I don't think I'd ever seen that before.
Yes.
Working out road.
Very distinctly different on this year that way.
Yeah,
It's finally coming in. In
good.
terms of the staff.
Yeah, you had somebody who knew what they were doing.
And is the attitude out of the water, is it better?
I'm sorry, it
Is the
This
general
point of view, it
attitude
is.
and behavior out in the
Yes.
water better?
seems calmer.
It's
been a great-
There's much voting going.
Yeah. It has been great. So the weekend's passion.
We'll take it.
Yeah, maybe in fog, it's been a lot of fog.
Oh, yeah, huge amounts.
That, that keeps the clouds down, you don't get people coming on my winter smoke.
And then the price of gas is gonna be a factor.
But the evolution of Manchester to a destination, I think, continues to grow. That is a destination harbor. So I think though gas may be more expensive and other things may discourage that activity. I think we continue to understand that I think we're nearing some always capacity for this harbor's activities, but again, how we staff it, how we look at enforcement versus maintenance is an important distinction.
Management will be important because it isn't that big.
That's,
So the Bion is still gonna be doing that harbor management plan,
Yes,
right? And that'll help, I think.
City, the event
analyze
and
the
that.
financials, et cetera.
should get underway this fall.
Here we are.
review and approve minutes. Gail sent some minutes out. Did anybody have a chance to look at those?
There's a lot of minutes.
I thought I just saw the ones. It's-
She sent them out.
The 12th, I saw. Probably the 12th. So, was there more than that?
I don't know, I didn't.
Yeah.
I like the same thing with these.
Oh,
I was
What's the
listening,
date of those, Dean?
the 12th.
Yeah.
There was a,
Did we approve
there
those?
was a joint meeting.
Oh, with the select board.
Yes, yes.
So are people good with them?
I had one thing I wanted to double check. Because I don't remember moving to support the fire truck. I voted to support it, but the motion, I think, came from John. Mack. So,
No, FinCom had to make a motion.
I have to check the,
Okay,
I'd like to check.
okay, fine, okay, we'll hold off on those minutes. Did anybody else think they made that motion?
I don't remember being hesitant about it, but.
Yeah.
So it says, yeah,
The motion.
second. Yes.
Wasn't.
Dean's
Well, no,
not
it
sure
should have
he
been,
made the
so it should have been two opposed. Peter. I votes.
Did you say no to the ladder truck, Peter?
Zach. I'm trying to check what meetings I was I there for that meeting?
I think I know my own mic is.
It's the only one who's.
No, I was there for the meeting. Thank you.
Okay.
Also.
Okay. Next meeting is scheduled for August 26th. What should we cover?
Basically, that's my third.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I know that's a typo, because if you add Wait, 14 and, oh, no, it's the 23rd, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, 14 and
25th is
9
a
is the,
Friday.
okay. Yeah,
That's our next meeting, right?
Yeah.
23rd.
what would we like to cover? What do we want to bring?
And I will not be able to be here the 23rd. I have a conflicting meeting.
Okay.
Well, we should have the facilities. Things.
A draft of the facility study?
Yeah, hopefully. Can't guarantee it.
I mean, that's the big, we have to whittle that down if we're gonna keep taxes to the house. And
Well, I think we have to have been able to digest the facility study before we do the capital, and I think what month are we targeting to do the capital, Greg? End of October?
That was my question.
Okay, so this year we want to do the capital budget separate from the operating budget. And do it in the fall. End of October, okay. So we need to have reviewed the facilities, but we could wait until. We could take that week off.
We're not sure because of the study.
What?
Wouldn't be opposed.
Yeah,
I
I
would
would,
either.
And then we would meet. Could meet on September 13th, which is the second Wednesday in September, and do the facility study that date.
certainly would have it before that, yeah.
Yeah,
Give us
Be
time.
able to digest it and have a decent discussion.
yeah, I think that's one reason.
Okay, 9/13, do facilities study,
So you're not meeting the 23rd?
correct.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. I want to be part of that other discussion.
9/13.
9/13, that's the second Wednesday in September.
the two things I'm thinking with the facilities.
Yeah.
Situation is, we really have to sharpen our focus on what our needs are.
Right.
And, you know, and then the other one is, we're gonna have to control our operating costs a lot. To
Right, but I
Fund
want
what we are
to
gonna-
separate the operating cost discussion from the capital items.
okay, but, you know.
I want to
one
approve a,
feeds on that.
well, not really, our operating budget does not have much flexibility.
Well, we don't wanna increase.
Now, you at some point wanted to discuss staffing, Greg. But you have some study being done, right?
We've got a compensation study.
Yeah, and when's that scheduled to be done?
That'll be done by the early September.
Scope of that is looking at compensation across the entire,
It's focused on department heads and a few assistants.
assistance, yes.
So there are a few.
Thank you, yes.
Departments where we might want to boost the assistant to full assistant.
Yes. I remember that while ago when you raised that.
So we could do that in the second meeting in September.
Yep.
Staffing,
Yes.
September 27th. Okay. Looking for this. Yeah, it's out, we come on the first 2 weeks. in October. September 13th. The second Wednesday. The one after that is September 27th, which we were gonna do staffing. And then October, we don't know what we do. We're gonna do capital in October. But Greg wants it towards the end. You want time after we've done the facility study, right? So October 25th,
When do you plan to bring, if you plan to separate the discussion on capital and operating, which I think is fantastic. Do you plan to bring those separately to the select board for a peek?
We certainly can,
If you're approaching it that way, it might make sense,
yeah,
to do that.
okay. Okay,
Potentially. Still a joint presentation. Your second meeting in October. Could be a joint meeting. Is that,
Well, it might be good for FinCom to kind of chew on it on their own, I think.
yeah, well, I think we prefer to meet on it alone and
And
see
then
if
come
we have
advise the select board,
changes.
but I like
we
the
wanna
idea of doing
suggest,
it
and then meet
separately.
jointly after that. Okay. Before we. And hopefully.
So we might be targeting that joint meeting. End of October or November?
Yeah, baby, November, yeah,
probably the second meeting.
The basic pattern for meetings is second and fourth Wednesdays. It's your
that's what we're
general
aiming
approach,
for, yeah. When appropriate, now I think. We're not gonna wanna meet on the fourth Wednesday of November, because it's the day before Thanksgiving.
So we go to Thanksgiving. And we're not meeting.
So we might do a joint meeting on November 29th.
Sorry. this is nothing to do, sorry.
10:25, it's capital. And then we're thinking of a joint meeting with the select board. 11:29, but that could be early, we might want it early. I don't know. I don't know how long it's gonna take us to go through capital.
When you say capital, you don't just mean the facilities, you mean any capital item across all the departments, correct?
Yes. Right, yeah,
So that'll be on the 5th.
Five-year plans.
Sure.
we are looking, we wanna look longer term,
Right,
5
and
years.
some of this is gonna fall into that exclusion.
Right. Yes, yeah. I think we wanna look at all the projects we need to do. And figure out when they reasonably can be done. Prioritize stuff. Right, I mean, we got lots of expenses coming up. And the stuff we've been avoiding. Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
So Andy makes a motion to adjourn, Peter seconds it. Oh, Tom,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Andy, and Sarah votes yes. Please,
That was easy.
we accomplished a lot.
That's a good meeting, you guys did a description
I
line.
know.
You know, Sarah. Absolutely.
The most expensive one, the one that said the rate is high peak now, the high peak down the road. The cost for that was the total cost for now and then,
Both things.
yes, okay. So it should be pretty similar
Good night, Andy.
to the cost. It should maybe even be a little less than cost to do it all at once.
Phase 1 is.
Yes, right, yes, and phase 2 is
So.
25, 30 years down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,